Retro Hangover is supported via Patreon by listeners like you. We would especially like to thank patrons Lyle McCarnes, Ashton Ruby, Randall Quiggle, and Tony G. Your continued engagement and generous donations are deeply appreciated.
Open your ears and crack some beers. You're listening to episode 82 of Retro Hangover.
And hello, retro and classic gamers. Welcome to the podcast where we bring bouncing babes bearing burdens of bourbon and brothels. This is episode 82 of the Retro Hangover podcast. I am your co-host, Chris Copleen. And, as always, your host, Shane Wicked Dick Dragon Weave Koski.
Oh, great. Now all I can picture is just a dragon with just a real fine-ass hair weave on it, and I don't know what to do with that information, so thank you.
It's all weaved and gnarled, and
It's just, it becomes part of the dragon's scales. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think it's kind of hot.
Yeah, definitely. Makes sense.
Yeah. In any case, we're talking about dragons with wicked weaves because this week's episode is Bayonetta, as you probably already know, because it's Valentine's Day. And who better to represent Valentine's Day? Well, it's actually the week before Valentine's Day when this drops, but you know what we're saying. And who better to represent that than Bayonetta?
That's
because she is the embodiment of love and faithfulness and just dedication. It's all like enveloped into one. Like that is the perfect woman you would have on Valentine's Day. That's who you want.
It's a great delivery. Okay, thanks, Chris.
It's who you want on Valentine's Day.
Is
if you're into women.
Woman, I guess. Mm-hmm.
What do you mean,
She
woman,
don't
you
wear
guess?
her hair as clothes.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it saves you a lot of money on shopping for what it's worth, I guess.
That is true. Though
Yeah.
oral sex might be interesting.
I mean, when isn't it really, you know?
I mean, more interesting.
Okay. That's fair.
Don't
I just
wanna
feel
go
like
in-
it probably involves a lot more guns when she's there, but, you know,
Well, I
maybe
mean-
you're into that.
Maybe. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to think, if she can contort her hair to do things,
Mm.
and obviously she doesn't shave. So, I mean,
Oh, God.
I don't really want to get into a debate about oral
I
sex
don't
and the
know
intricacies thereof with
Why I
Bayonetta.
didn't even think
in our intro.
about other body hair being a part of that wicked weave than just her head. God damn it. Thank you
It's
for
everywhere.
that, Chris.
You're welcome.
Jesus Christ. Well, this
It's a push
episode is
attack.
starting off real well.
I think it is. I'm having a good time. In any case, Shane,
Yeah.
to make this episode start off even better,
Yeah, sure.
what have you been up to, my dude?
Well, I have been working on finishing my playthrough of Trials of Mana, and I think I'm getting close.
Okay.
I think my party is about, what am I, level 54 now? And
You're level 55.
say what?
You told me you were level 55.
I don't know, 54, 55, somewhere around there. Point being is that
Okay.
I'm getting close to the end. I've got one Benevodon left to conquer. And as I was telling Chris in our Discord yesterday or the day before, I think I might have been just super fortunate enough to run into a streak of very weird luck in that I have been completely unable to get one of my party members' class change items to drop. So that's neat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're pissed. It was great.
I'm not super happy about it. Like, I didn't know that that's how that functions, that the way to get your character to progress to their third class is you have to hit a certain level threshold, which is 38, but then you also need a class item in order to do that. And I was not aware that those randomly drop, and also that you can get duplicates. So at first I was like, oh, it's random. Okay, fine. Like I might have to wait a little bit to get the one I want. Okay, I guess. And then I got one that became a duplicate item of one that I had already gotten before. And I was like, oh, so this is how this works. Neat. And that's the part where then I messaged Chris on Discord, and I was like, yo, what the actual fuck though? And he was just like, yeah, it's how it works. Like,
yeah,
great. I'm glad that
you just suck.
Like 25-ish hours into this game and am now realizing this. It's good. But now I'm so far into it that, you know, I have to finish it. All that being said though, I have enjoyed my time with the game quite a bit. So it's, I guess, a relatively minor thing in the grand scheme of things, but it's still kind of annoying. But that's pretty much been most of my time. I've been watching Brianna play Skyward Sword, and good lord, that game fucking sucks. I don't care what anybody says. That game is awful.
Is she thinking the same thing?
Oh, she fucking hates it, but she's determined to finish it now because, like I've said in previous episodes, she's made her own personal mission to finish every Zelda game, and so she's determined to get through this one. And my god, it's just, and the thing is the game itself I think would actually be all right if it wasn't wholly relying on the stupid ass motion control gimmick, because that's where like 95% of the frustration honestly comes from. Like when you're trying to attack an enemy and the sword swings in this real wonky fashion, or the whole bug collecting mini game where it's just completely fucking inaccurate and you're running around like an idiot trying to catch bugs with a net swinging around because you can't aim correctly. It's just, the whole game is frustrating. You should never ever have to fight the controls of a game in order to play the game, and that's exactly what happens with this one.
Isn't it like absurdly long too?
I mean, so far, it doesn't seem to be any longer than any other mainline Zelda title, but I will say that it seems to do a lot more backtracking than other ones, which is in and of itself kind of a shitty thing anyway. But yeah, it's not great. I already told her several times there was a reason I never played that one, and if I were her, I would have given up already. But she is very determined, so kudos to her, I guess.
That sucks. It's a sucky game because a lot of people liked it when it came out, but I know people going back and looking at it hasn't necessarily aged well. It's like an inverse Twilight or inverse Wind Waker. Yeah. I don't even know how people even consider Twilight Princess nowadays.
I don't know, because that's one that I've tried to play and have not actually finished for some of the same reasons. But now that I have a different version of it, that might be a different story. But right. I was actually... I was amazed looking at the old like reviews of this game and it being like, this is the best game for the system, and it's a showcase of what motion controls are meant to do. And I'm like, fuck off. This game is the most frustrating shit I have ever played. I don't know, man. Anyway, so that's what we've been up to. What about you? Hopefully whatever you've been doing has been more enjoyable.
Well, if I didn't say it last episode, I did get the platinum for Trials of Mana.
Oh, there you go.
So there's that.
Yeah.
And you can actually listen to a full kind of in-depth view of that on the Good, the Bad, and the Backlog podcast that I did with Adam from there. Uh-huh. And we're also going to be doing our own deep dive on this podcast with Adam as part of our RH guidance series for all patrons at any level. So stay tuned for that. And I think we're going to have some good discussions. Other than that, yeah, I mean, all the games I've been playing have kind of been for future projects. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, because I have been having fun with them. One was Streets of Rage 4, which I've pretty much done everything in that game I want to do with it. Mm-hmm. Just because there's more trophies to get, but I have no interest in getting them. But I've seen myself going back to it eventually just because I haven't played it multiplayer yet. I do want to bust it out. I do want to play it with my kid. I do want to play it online, as you do with those kind of beat 'em up games. I actually thought it was a really good game. I really did enjoy myself, but it was just missing something compared to Streets of Rage 2. Mm-hmm. And I can't put my finger on it. I think it's the soundtrack, because I noticed I was having a lot more fun with it when I put on the retro soundtrack, because the newer tracks just don't jive with what Streets of Rage is. It's not bad music, but it's not like Streets of Rage music, which is just Yuzo Koshiro going full house and house techno, and it's so good. And everything that Yuzo does is amazing anyway. But I did have a good time with that. I am going to be doing a deep depth episode on Streets of Rage 4 with Goobs from the Secret Levels podcast. That's scheduled, and I'm looking forward to doing that. And then after I was done with that one, I moved to 13 Sentinels for the PlayStation 4, which I'm not entirely sure how I feel about that game yet. It has a really interesting plot. It has a really good way of telling that plot, but it's definitely, it feels like an adventure game that leans more towards a graphic novel. And every once in a while you can go fight these kind of strategic battles in between to kind of break up the monotony. However, the plot telling is so addictive because it's like the whodunit kind of plot telling. Every single story leaves you on a cliffhanger because you got 13 characters and you progress through the story through one of those characters each time, and each one of those characters gives you hints to what's going on in another character's story, and it doesn't really piece everything together, and it's really trippy, very, very sci-fi. And I would tell anyone who really does like sci-fi games to check it out, because it's interesting. However, if just be advised, this is an adventure game. It's a Vanillaware game. It's an Atlas game, but it's an adventure game. So a lot of text, a lot of paying attention to what everybody says. Unlike kind of this week's game.
Oh, are we? So when you say adventure game, are you talking also like pixel hunting for the right fucking items to pick up, and then like really weird esoteric puzzles to put like bubble gum and a tree branch together to fix a lock or some bullshit? Or
I'm not going to say yes, but there are elements of that.
Okay. Well, as long as they don't lean into that too hard, because, and this is a discussion that we'll have eventually once we start talking about those games on a future episode, but the later iterations of some of those adventure games, like, you know, later in the King's Quest series and stuff like that, that shit just got way out of hand.
No, you're absolutely right. It's not like that at all. Like you do, like, it has a lot of those elements, but nothing is too obtuse that you can't figure it out, or the game will really hold your hand to let you know how to do it.
I gotcha.
The developers who made that game wanted to tell a story, and that's what it's doing. The primary purpose is we want you to know the story we wanted to tell.
And is it a PS4 exclusive?
Yes.
It is, okay.
Yes. It's you can find it relatively cheap. I got it for $20 as part of a Black Friday sale. It's just, I know it didn't sell well, and I think there's more copies out on the shelves than people were willing to buy.
Right.
So if you can find it for cheap, it's worth checking out, definitely. I got mine for free because GameStop screwed up, so yay me. But yeah, go take a look at it.
Cool. All right. Yeah, I'll have to check that out at some point.
And I might be doing an episode on the Region Free Gamers podcast for that game. It's not confirmed though, but you should check them out anyway because they're our friends.
That's true.
Support your friends.
Yeah. As you can see, we are nothing if not busy. So getting that
just
content,
to turn out that content
out to you one way or another. So
while we enjoy it, it's like the best punishment ever. Like, what are you doing? I gotta play video games. I have to play this game so I can get this content out to you.
Yeah, well, it's like I have to finish Trials now because now I've got two people waiting on me to do an RH Gaiden. So, you know, gotta get it done.
Yeah, we're motivating. We're inspiring.
That's right.
We're bad influences, actually, but it's all good. Just like, you know what else is a bad influence, Shane?
The Mary Jane.
I guess, but I would say it's our protagonist in this episode of Retro Hangover, which is Bayonetta. She is a terrible influence or a great influence, depending on how you view it. Either way, she is a interesting and dynamic character, and this game is interesting and dynamic as well. But we'll get more into that after we cover our brief history. So Shane,
yes,
go ahead, take it away, and tell everybody the brief history of Bayonetta.
Grabbing the attention of teenage boys, or men that still think and behave like teenage boys, so most of us, is not particularly difficult. Mix equal parts violence, edginess, and sexy ladies, stir well in a finely polished 3D hack and slash style cooking pot, let simmer for a few hours, and you have got yourself a recipe for success. If there is any game development kitchen you could expect this kind of thick-ass cake to come out of, Platinum Games should certainly be at the top of the list. And with only the second game in their now storied repertoire, Bayonetta, they would do exactly that. Director Hideki Kamiya would begin work on Bayonetta in 2007, the same year his former development house, Clover Studio, went defunct. Kamiya would task Mari Shimazaki with designing the titular character, emphasizing a deliberate focus on a fashionable and sexy aesthetic. This approach would be acutely evident in the character's final design. Bayonetta would feature librarian-style black-rimmed glasses, long legs, and even longer black hair that would not only be used for devastating combat maneuvers and summoning demons through portals, but would also magically function as Bayonetta's actual clothes. Trust us, it makes sense eventually. The overall design direction was guided by embracing the themes of femininity and sexuality, a decision that would become the focal point of many socio-political discussions in the years to follow. Much of Bayonetta's foundational mechanics and design can be traced back to the Devil May Cry series, one that several Platinum employees worked on, with Kamiya at the helm for the first iteration. Kamiya would even go on record as having played quite a bit of Devil May Cry 4 for inspiration. This lineage would become most apparent in Bayonetta's combat, which awards players for stringing together intricate and precise combos with a performance ranking at the end of every segment. A fresh addition to the formula would be the mechanic known as Witch Time, which provides players with a brief moment of slowed time, much like Max Payne's groundbreaking Bullet Time feature, in which to pummel enemies. Unlike other implementations of this particular gameplay mechanic, Witch Time is only activated by the player dodging an incoming attack at exactly the right moment. In addition to this, the titular character would also have access to a slew of combos, juggles, and torture moves that acted much like Mortal Kombat finishers. Bayonetta would release in Japan on October 29th, 2009, and in North America on January 5th of 2010, with PAL regions getting their copy 3 days later. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Bayonetta's critical reception was through the roof. Japanese game magazine Famitsu would give the Xbox 360 version a perfect score, which was a rarity at the time. North American reviewers would also give the game high marks, with the Xbox 360 version receiving an aggregate score of 90% on Metacritic. Sales, however, were not quite as explosive. The original PS3 and Xbox 360 releases would climax at about 2.1 million copies sold, with subsequent Wii U and Switch versions not really jacking up those total sales numbers as much as one might hope. Even so, Bayonetta as a character would quickly become one of the most iconic female protagonists in all of gaming, kick-flipping her way onto the Smash Bros. Roster as DLC for the Wii U and the 3DS, and reportedly receiving a third installment of her eponymous series for the Nintendo Switch sometime in the near future. And that is your brief history of Bayonetta.
And thank you for that brief history, Shane.
You're very welcome.
We do appreciate it. It's very hot. I'm getting all hot and bothered with your sultry voice. It's just, it's going to be a great Valentine's Day. I'm telling you. As you talk about Bayonetta. I'm just thinking about her right now. Well, I think about Bayonetta and all the sexy moves she makes. How about you tell your personal experiences, and I'll be back in a few minutes.
Great. Just gonna edit in some very appropriate noises in the background. Be great. It's like
I'm sure you will.
Who's stirring macaroni? So anyway, my experience is honestly it's pretty brief, frankly. As most of you know, if you've listened to the show before, this particular era of games, specifically the Xbox 360, was something that I got into towards the end of that life cycle. I didn't pick up a 360 until it was pretty close to being the tail end, really. And so fortunately, I was able to get a lot of pre-owned games for relatively cheap. So I was able to stack that library up fairly quickly, which was nice, I guess. Being a patient gamer pays off, I suppose. And this was one of the ones that I had picked up eventually, pre-owned, probably from GameStop. And I went on to play it on very easy mode because it's me. And I think that gave me a lot less trouble than perhaps I think Chris might have gotten, which I'll talk about in a second. But this was also back at the time where I was able to sit down and just like focus on one game and play through it from start to finish. And I feel like I'm just somehow incapable of doing that anymore. I have so many other games I'm trying to play or I want to start playing that I think I've developed some sort of weird gaming ADD where I just start playing something, put a few hours into it, and then try to play something else. And then all this ends up doing is just making so that everything takes longer to finish. But for this one, at the very least, I basically just focused on nothing but this and played it from start to finish. And overall, I actually really enjoyed my time with it. But that's kind of my experience. What about you, Chris?
So me being the weeb I am, I decided to go get this game almost as soon as it came out because it got a perfect score from Famitsu.
Mm-hmm.
Because any game that Famitsu gives a 10 out of 10 or 40 out of 40, I have to get as someone who is just in love with Japanese culture, which I actually have dialed it down a lot since then. But because it got that score, I had to get it. So I got it, and I didn't make it too far just because the difficulty got the best of me. I have to play everything on normal. I can't do it. I can't put games on easy or very. I just can't. I can't.
You have to learn to bring yourself down to my level, Chris.
I can't do it. It's a problem. Like even my kid has that problem, and he did it with Persona 5, and I finally had to convince him to lower it down to easy because he kept dying on normal. And he reluctantly did it. I, on the other hand, will not take that advice, as I didn't with Bayonetta. I just kept on playing on normal and kept on getting my ass kicked, so I gave it up. And then when it came out again for the Wii U years later with Bayonetta 2, that's when I finally sat down. I decided I was going to beat the game. And I did beat the game for the Wii U, because the Wii U is the best console of all time. It makes every game better.
Yep, absolutely.
And yes. And that's kind of my personal experience. I don't have it for the Switch. But yeah, it was definitely a great game when it came out for the 360. I don't know. I assume it was because of the difficulty, just because I don't remember the exact reason I stopped playing it. I think it was just kind of the reason everyone stops playing games when you don't finish them. It's just you get ready to move on to something else catches your attention. Maybe it was Mass Effect 2 for all I fucking know. But yeah, I put it down probably about halfway through the game. And then I came back to it later.
I gotcha. Yeah, I haven't. The only copy of this I own is the original 360 copy. I have not repurchased this at all for my Switch or anything. Although at some point I do actually want to pick up the sequel because I have yet to play that. But
yeah, well, the only reason I got it for the Wii U is because it came with the sequel.
Right. Yeah.
It was a pack-in. It was a bonus, and it was nice. And I figured, well, I'll beat it now since I've never made it all the way through.
Yeah.
And I still think it's one of the better ways to play it.
Well, I mean, it's the Wii U, so you're going to make that argument regardless, but
of course I am.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk a little bit about what is probably one of the most ridiculous aspects in an arguably already ridiculous and over the top game, the writing.
Yeah, it's bombastic. It's ridiculous. And it's the kind of plot you immediately just kind of throw out the window because the game has absolutely no expectation that you're going to give two flying fucks about the plot.
That is true. Yeah.
It makes it abundantly clear that the plot is not important to this game. And it just wants you to kick everything's ass.
Yeah, so the director himself like went on record stating that the only reason the plot's even there is just to give you a reason to continue progressing the game. So I mean, that in and of itself kind of tells you everything you need to know about how even the developers themselves approached the plot of this game. But I think the thing that encapsulates it just the best is how the game starts. So this approach cannot possibly be more evident than with that opening scene. So how does Bayonetta choose to give you its, requisite exposition dump, right? Does it do, a cutscene where you are just the passive observer like so many games do? No. Oh, no. You get voiced over narration over top of you battling against angels while you are on a giant chunk of a clock tower that is hurtling through space towards the surface of the earth with a goddamn multi-headed dragon angel abomination thing flying around in the background, making itself known, shooting shit and like it. This is how you get the story. Okay. So it's already basically setting you up to be like, okay, listen, yes, we're going to give you all this information. And if you want to pay attention, that's, totally cool. You do you, but also what's more important is that you're focusing on the fighting. And so it makes it very upfront, like from like second one, that is the focus of this game.
Not to mention every other cutscene in the game. I won't say every other cutscene, but most cutscenes in the game, where they're trying to tell you the plot, it's just Bayonetta dancing around doing sexy things, like spreading her legs, making it very apparent, like, hey, look at this sexy lady and all the sexy things she's doing, while plot is being thrown in your face along with sexy moves. Yeah. So there's something there. Okay, like she had been awoken from a casket 20 years prior to the events of this game, and apparently she's part of this secret society of witches. And something about a young child that is actually her, spoilers, and gets thrown into the past by her father or something. I don't know. It's there. I think it's a pretty overly complicated for the way they tell it. But if you really want to care about it, I don't think it's too hard to understand, and it doesn't really matter.
Well, that's the thing, is that ultimately it doesn't matter for the game. You could know zero about what the background plot is, and it would still be, you'd be just fine, because really it's all about, kicking the shit out of stuff and fighting giant bosses, and that's really it. And that's fine. And anyway, the thing is like, the plot itself, I think if this were in any other game, it would be super fucking weak. And that's just because it is rooted in one of the most tropey, overused things in video games already, which is an eternal battle between, demons and angels. And I'm saying this as a Diablo fan. Like I fully recognize that shit is overplayed. And this is basically the tact that they're going with here too. It's like, 500 years ago, the Umbra witches of darkness and the Lumen sages of the light, they were keeping the balance between the forces on Earth, and then some shit went down and they fought each other and things got all screwed up, and then you were in a sleep for 500 years or 480 years, I guess. And also Bayonetta has amnesia, because why not? Everything has to have a character with amnesia, right? It's the most convenient plot device in the world.
It's a JRPG.
Yeah, exactly. So, it is what it is. But this is definitely one of those games where, you can, as Chris said, just throw it out the window. Like, if you really care, awesome, but it's not necessary.
Well, the characters bring it to life, man. Bayonetta herself and her voice actress, I'm trying to grab her name. I know I wrote it down somewhere, but
Helena something.
That works. Yes. She brings her to life. Same with, was it Rodan? Mm-hmm. Rodin? Enzo, you got Luca, and Jean, they all fucking bring their characters to life. And it's not the most believable because everything they say is hokey, but you need it to be hokey. It's not that you want it to be hokey. It has to be hokey. It has to be like, this is the most ridiculous shit I hear, but I love it.
Well, it's It's the same thing as like House of the Dead when we talked about that, right? It's like the same thing. Like this is in that same vein of like fantastic like B-movie schlock type shit. Because I mean, let's be real. There's no way that anybody could pull off a dialogue line like, I got a fever and the only cure is more dead angels with a straight fucking face.
Which is a reference to an SNL skit.
Which it is.
Which is great.
Yeah. But it works. That's the thing, is because they're not self-serious. They're very much aware that of just how ridiculous the whole premise in the game is. They just have fun with it and it works.
Yeah, the voice actress, by the way, is Helena Taylor, and we'll talk more about music and sound when we get to it.
Oh, there you go.
But yeah, I mean, absolutely. Bayonetta's the delivery that all these characters have is just so good. It's so delightful. It's so charming. It's entirely vulgar, and I love it. It's not overly vulgar like House of the Dead. It doesn't go into that territory.
No, that's true.
It flirts with it. That's actually a fitting theme for the entire game is flirt.
That's actually very accurate. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Flirt and tease.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of teasing. I mean, yeah, I can't remember another game where I kept on trying to tilt my head and see if I could see things at a different angle. It doesn't work, by the way.
And that's saying a lot for a game that honestly doesn't really leave that much to the imagination to begin with. But,
no, it doesn't. Yeah. It does not.
Also, as a related sidebar, I just really appreciate that Enzo as a character is basically Joe Pesci. I just really like that.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, again, plot, don't worry about the plot, have fun. Enjoy the dialogue, enjoy the banter. It doesn't really matter if you're actually following along with it. There's something there for you if you really give a shit about lore, you know, because and you might need to look in expanded universe material in order to find it if you want to bitch about that kind of stuff. But pretty much everything is there.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you don't have to worry about the story too much, then hopefully you can rely on the gameplay to prop it up, which fortunately you can.
Yeah.
So, okay. My take on gameplay mechanics for Bayonetta is that this game is fucking hard. Even on very easy, which I believe there are 5 difficulties. It's like very easy, normal, hard, and then like, what is it? Fucking like ultimate infinite climax or whatever ridiculous shit they call that.
Of course they would.
Yeah. And I played it on very easy. And even then, this is not something that you can just button mash your way through. A lot of action style games like this, if you play it on the easiest difficulty, you can probably just hit a button over and over and mostly be fine. This will not let you do that. And I learned that very quickly. It wants you to learn how to do combos effectively, and perhaps even more importantly, it wants you to learn how to make effective use of that witch time mechanic. So as someone who's not necessarily super into, you know, combo heavy games like Devil May Cry and that stuff, not that I dislike them, it's just not like my main cup of tea or anything. This definitely was frustrating for me at times. What I ended up doing, and I don't know if this is common or if I'm just awful at it, that could be the case, is I sort of discovered like a very small subset of the moves in this game that I found to work generally well, and then just kind of stuck with those for like most of the game, which is probably kind of a shame because there is just a ton of variation in the combat mechanics in this game. But I would almost say, and this actually kind of also dovetails into the equipment, which we'll get into in a little bit, but I almost felt like it was a little overwhelming. Like there was so much that I didn't know what to use.
I was about to use that exact same word. The game is overwhelming in the amount of things you can do, the amount of moves you can perform, because there are so many different sets of equipment, as you said. So there's like your base set of attacks with pistols, and then you have like shotguns that could go on your legs while you have different weapons that you're carrying up top. And each has a different move set. Right. Now, once you learn these moves, as you said, like it becomes satisfying. So, especially learning how to pull off the wicked weaves, which is essential in order to survive, that becomes satisfying. And it becomes extremely satisfying the more you learn each different weapon subset. But that's the thing. There are so many different weapon subsets, and they each can control completely different. They each control their own special way. They each have their own separate combos. And just having that many options, yeah, it is really overwhelming. I would say it's overwhelming in a good way for this type of game, if you're into this type of game. But much like Shane, this isn't my forte. If I'm going to be playing a game like this, I'm going to be like the game we were mentioning earlier, Trials of Mana, which is more basic in its execution. Now, I do think, Trials of Mana is a little too basic, but this is almost the opposite. This is like the Final Fantasy Tactics of action RPG, where you just have, and maybe like there's probably an even more absurd comparison. I'm just going off the seat of my pants here. There's just so many different options you need to be aware of that it's only really, I don't want to say it's only going to appeal because I liked it, but the primary appeal is to those people who love the action, love the 3D action games, love the 3D hack and slashes, and can really get into the minutia of all the different movesets that there are and really be able to take advantage of everything it has to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. It's a good problem to have, right? I'm not necessarily calling it out as a negative, and I don't think you are either. It's just that
no.
For me, and it sounds like for you as well, it was just difficult because I end up getting this sort of decision paralysis of like, okay, do I sink, into this one gear loadout and build that out and get good at that, or am I making the wrong decision and there's a better combination I could be using? And there's just so many different things to choose from that I never felt like I had a clear idea of like where I was going with my equipment and skill loadout for most of this game. I felt like I was just doing it by the seat of my fucking pants most of the time. Of just like, I don't know, this one seems cool, I guess I'll use this, and then figuring it out as I go, which maybe was intended. I don't know, but I never felt like I was like in a real good groove with anything regarding, the move sets and the equipment. And at the end of the day, I feel like it's because the intention was for this game to be played multiple times. I think it was designed with that in mind.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, as Chris mentioned, if you're someone who this is your jam, then you fucking probably love this game. There are actually a lot of people that consider this to be the one of, if not the best 3D action games ever made. And if you're super into it, I could totally see why. There is so much replayability there. And because the game mechanics are as good as they are, it's not necessarily as much of a chore to go back and replay, verses, which are what they call the different stages. So I totally get it. But for someone who is just kind of casually playing through it, and they're probably going to play it once just to experience it, yeah, it can feel like there's way more going on than you can really, wrap your head around. Now, having said all that, I will just say that as far as the gameplay itself is concerned, it feels fantastic.
Buttery smooth.
It's so smooth. Like, it's responsive. It's just so much fun to control. And there's actually a reason I explicitly said this earlier before the brief history about Skyward Sword, because it's coming up again right now, which is in Bayonetta, you never once feel like you are fighting the game's controls, which is like 100% critical for this type of games, especially, but just games in general. And so that could have been something that could have very, very easily broken this entire experience, even worse than what I'm seeing with something like Skyward Sword. Like,
oh yeah,
you should never have to do that.
Yeah, I have that feeling, when the old saying that if you die in a game that's hard and you feel like it's your fault, then you have a game that controls well. Every death I suffered in Bayonetta was me knowing I was not good enough at the game and I needed to get better. Right. It wasn't because the enemies were cheap. It wasn't because the enemies were broken. It was because they were telegraphing their moves and I just wasn't good enough to get out of the way and follow and have the twitch skills to follow up with a good enough combo to really dissolve the enemy. It took practice. And really think about it, it kind of lends itself to the development history of Kamiya and Clover Studio and the Devil May Cry series they had before that. They were tough games. If you even look back at God Hand, the Beautiful Joe series, Devil May Cry, it's kind of a trademark. That's the kind of game they are. They are for the hardcore action fans. And it is meant to overwhelm you. And it is meant for the players that spend a lot of time grinding down and practicing in order to get really good at these games. And every single example of those, yeah, they control really well. They're a really fun experience. That's a Platinum trademark. That's what Platinum is known for, is it's smooth, easy to grasp the basics of combat. And that's what you get with Bayonetta. But you do need to pay attention to what the enemies are going to do, or you're going to get just absolutely mauled. As you said, on very easy mode, you made it through and it was still hard for you on very easy. In normal mode, I think what is it? The boss fight with Jean, the last boss fight with Jean. I think I died about 10 times in that battle, just learning how to fight her properly.
Yeah.
And switching out weapons and figuring out which one worked best with my playstyle. And like you said, that is the intent. I think that's up to the player. Which playstyle do they enjoy the most? Which playstyle are you most comfortable with? And which one are you going to choose to master? And I love that about this game. But it, like you said, it's also overwhelming. You're always second guessing whether or not you're making the right combination.
Yeah. Yeah. And before we move on, I wanted to touch on the witch time stuff a little bit specifically. Mm-hmm. So I did actually really enjoy that mechanic. And I think there were a lot of games that tried to do this in the wake of Max Payne, because Max Payne was really the first one to do this in the iteration that, we see it so often now. And there were a lot of imitators that frankly didn't do it nearly as well. This is very, very similar. It's different in how you activate it, of course, in that it's not an on-demand button, but it's more of a reaction to you just being good at dodging things. But it is really satisfying when you pull it off. But much like the rest of the game, it is very punishing if you fuck it up.
Yes.
But the thing that they've done here in Bayonetta that was not done in Max Payne or in a lot of their other sort of imitations of that is that it is also incorporated in the level traversal of several of the different areas, which I think is a really, really great addition. Incorporating some of your quote unquote combat maneuvers into the actual more exploratory parts of the game, to the point where not so much, but because I don't want to go too far down that comparison because it's not 100% accurate, but the closest thing I could come to is it almost gives it a little bit of like a Metroidvania-esque kind of feel in that you are using your character's abilities in order to reach different places in a level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not the greatest comparison, of course, like you said, but
right.
There's some parallels there to be sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so what did you think about the motorcycle and spaceship levels?
Oh, those were fun as hell.
You like them?
Yeah. No, I actually really enjoyed. I unless they really, really missed the mark, I generally like it when a game changes things up a little bit and tries to do something different to keep things fresh. And so by and large, I don't recall having too many qualms with those. I thought that they were pretty entertaining.
I liked the motorcycle level.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it went on a little too long.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
I didn't really like the spaceship level, the Space Harrier level, and is direct nod to Space Harrier. Even plays the theme to Space Harrier in the background.
Mm.
But it's, first of all, it wasn't as good as Space Harrier. Second of all, it too went on a little too long. I think they both went on. I think they both overstayed their welcome, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't levy that as a criticism against the game overall, because it is just trying to switch things out and add some varied gameplay. However, those segments, I didn't necessarily care much for them because they were so long. However, the fact that they did throw in a bunch of nods to Sega games with the Afterburner theme playing in the background of the motorcycle level, And the whole entire nod to Space Harrier, even at the beginning of it, where she says, "Welcome to my fantasy zone," is just a complete. It's a complete moment if you're a Sega fan that enjoys those games, to just be like, "Oh my fucking god, it's Space Harrier." They're like, "Oh, they're playing that song," and that made the entire thing. And that's what I love. And not everyone's going to get it, but I do, and I love it.
Well, and I think that you are precisely the kind of person that they did that for, though, right? So.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, and that's not even to say that, you know, the halos that you collect are basically just Sonic rings.
They're Sonic rings. I mean, you're burying Dr. Robotnik at the beginning of the game.
That's right. Eggman the Destroyer.
They're going to hate him in hell more than they hate him up here. So we're going to make sure he doesn't come back.
That's right. All right. So moving on. I mean, we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but let's talk a little bit about how this game looks. So what do you think about the graphics?
They still look phenomenal. Yeah. There's been a little bit of aging, obviously. It's been over a decade since this game came out, as, you know, if you're on Retro podcast show. But it still looks good. You can still find this game. You can pick this up on the Switch, as we said earlier, and it's going to look good. It's going to look good on your Wii U. It's going to look good on your 360. It's going to look good on your PS4 or Xbox One. It looks like a game on your PS3. Anything
on PS3, it's a game.
Yeah, it's something you should avoid.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It just everything here, the little details they provide, and of course, like, the animation isn't perfect because of, you know, time passes and you start to notice little things, and the voices don't exactly sync up. The lips don't sync up with the voices all the time exactly. But yeah, I don't even think this necessarily was a big budget game, just because this was the third game from a development company, and really the second console game developed by Platinum Games.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they had a huge budget. So what they were able to do here was something really cool. And like everything, yes, it does have dull gray. It's dull and gray like every other game of that era, but yet it mixes it up with some really colorful aspects and some really good character design, particularly when it comes to the enemies. Especially the bosses, which are just fantastically designed and very original in thought, and a lot of penises. And there's nothing really I have nothing really to complain about.
Yeah, I don't really have any complaints either, frankly. But I will say, I was wondering where you were going with the dark and gray, because I wasn't going to necessarily agree with that, but you pulled it out in the end. So yeah. I do agree that I think one of the things that this game does manage to achieve is that it sets this very sort of, you know, dark ambiance overall, while still somehow managing to be very vibrant and colorful in a lot of places, arguably in the places that really, really matter the most, which I think is a lot of like the character design and like the, you know, combat special effects and things like that. So definitely kudos to them there. I think for me personally, one of the things that I like the most about the graphical presentation is that, frankly, I am just a huge sucker for dark fantasy, like pretty much anything like that, which honestly is a big part of why I like the Dark Souls series so much. It's really just about the aesthetic. And honestly, that's also why I'm afraid that if I were to play something that is like a Dark Souls-esque style game like Code Vein or something, that I might not like it as much, because to me personally, the overall aesthetic is so important to my enjoyment of it that I might not like it as much. But, you know, we'll see. But this game definitely has that, particularly with the enemies and especially with the bosses. We cannot overstate how intensely detailed these boss models are, and how just about every single one of them are just these giant level spanning bombastic fucking fights that just make really great use. And honestly, this is probably something we should have probably covered in gameplay mechanic, but since we're talking about it now, a lot of the boss fights make incredibly good use of the boss arena environment as well. It's very kinetic is the best way that I can describe it. It's not a matter of rolling up into like an open area and fighting a dude. It's quite literally you are traversing most of a stage in a lot of cases with just shit flying everywhere, and actually honestly traversing the boss itself because they're so big in many instances. But the boss design and the enemy design in this game could actually be ripped directly out of Bayonetta and put into a Dark Souls game, and no one would know the difference. That's how close they are. And yeah, and I think that's a big reason of why I like it as much as I do. I think the one minor qualm that I would point out, and this certainly does not apply to everybody, and you might not agree, is there were times during combat that I felt like just the sheer amount of special effects and flourishes and things that were happening felt much like the combat and equipment system, a little overwhelming. I distinctly remember parts where I kind of just felt like I was hitting buttons and hoping for the best, because I was just getting this like sensory overload of just so much shit happening on the screen all at once.
But that I would defend that part on the overwhelming part for the graphics, just because I believe that's just the intention of the game, is to be over the top and overwhelming visually.
Sure.
There is supposed to be a sensory overload.
Sure.
So I do want to, before we get to the audio portion of this, I do want to talk about probably the more controversial points.
Sure.
About just the amount of suggestive themes and even the design of Bayonetta herself, because obviously there's a lot of suggestive themes in this, even with specifically with the torture attacks, specifically with the joys where they put them on a horse and tie them up and continue to pull them back with bouncing boobies, which are pretty much exposed. It's very S&M. There's a lot of S&M in this game. Not to mention that I think a lot of people might look at Bayonetta as controversial, and I would disagree. So before we get to my thoughts, what are your thoughts kind of on just the overall sexuality of this game?
Yeah, so that is definitely a contentious topic, I think. Of course, this, you'd have to go into this with the caveat and arguably very sizable grain of salt that this is coming from the perspective of a straight white male, right? I'm not going to speak for women or anybody else, but from my perspective, I believe that the hypersexuality of Bayonetta's character in particular, because this is something that permeates pretty much the whole game, but if we're talking about just her, which I think is really the focal point, I don't see it as a negative because of the way that they approached it. And that is that I believe Bayonetta herself is not a stereotypical damsel in distress. If that were the case,
like Lollipop Chainsaw.
Right. Yeah. And even then, that's not quite as far down as I was thinking, but you're right. Yeah. But if she were the stereotypical sort of damsel in distress, and she needed to be saved by the, stock stoic looking, male hero guy, and she was also this over sexualized, I would feel that is a 100% valid argument. But in this particular instance, I think she owns her sexuality in such a way that it is a part of who she is, and she is comfortable with that and uses it to her benefit, and not in a sort of manipulative sort of way. I don't want to misconstrue the term use in that fashion. What I mean is that it is something that it's a tool in her proverbial belt that she is super comfortable with. It is part of who she is. And I think that's fine. Like, you run this really, really sort of tightrope walk when you start talking about these things, because if you start saying like, oh, well, sexuality shouldn't be in there and that should not be something that's highlighted, then you start to actually go in this weird opposite direction of, well, now you're sort of vilifying the sexual nature of a character when at the end of the day,
who is allowed to be sexual. Of course,
exactly. Like at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, we as human beings are sexual creatures. That's just a fact. And so if a character is going to own that in the way that I think Bayonetta does, I don't see that as a problem. And that for me, honestly, it to me, it seems more empowering than not. And
I agree.
That's the way that I see it.
And just go down the same line. First of all, again, just like Shane said, I'm a dude and I like women.
Yep.
So I can't speak for the perspective of anything other than what I am. So with that being said, a couple things that people need to keep in mind if they are offended by Bayonetta. Bayonetta was designed by a woman, primarily designed by a woman with the female perspective. This is why she's proportional. If you pay attention to a lot of other characters that are hypersexualized, they are not exactly the most proportioned. They're an unrealistic fantasy caricature of what men would want. Whereas Bayonetta she's a proportional woman. It's someone if they were 6 foot tall in real life, they would look like that. I mean, I think of like Elizabeth Hurley, for example.
Yeah.
That's a real person. I could see a woman looking like that. Not only that, like you said, it's more empowering. She owns her sexuality. And I agree with you. It seems more empowering than advantageous. Now, me as a dude, I look at that, I'm like, oh my God, this is just incredibly sexy. But I actually find it more sexy coming from a character like Bayonetta than some pinup doll that needs to be saved from the dungeon.
Yeah.
And I think that needs to be something said about that. Now, if you're a woman and you hate Bayonetta, fine. I would love to hear your perspective. I would love to know where you're coming from. Or if you're a woman, you love Bayonetta, I'd like you to articulate it more. I'd love to hear that perspective. But that's just my kind of perspective as I have where I'm at, and just kind of the things I've heard about the direction they wanted to take Bayonetta in and how she does own her sexuality. And I think by extension, you see that with how she treats the character. She's very comfortable in who she is. And I think that's a really good positive quality. And no one, she is like owned by no one. She is used by no one. She is her own person and she controls everything. That's special. So that's why I absolutely have no problem with it. I would actually like to see more characters like that, regardless of gender or orientation, moving in the future, because I think that actually makes for a stronger character and it makes them more human, even if it is over the top, like in the case of Bayonetta.
Yeah, and unless I'm 100% misremembering, I don't recall any instance in the game where her sexuality was something that she used to get her way in a very explicit fashion or anything. And any other character's reaction to her as a woman, as a sexual being, frankly, that reaction was 100% on them, because she was not purposefully doing anything to elicit that. She just is who she is.
Exactly. And the way she dismisses Luca is even further evidence of that. She's always just putting him down. It's great. I love it.
It's like that cutscene where they're like in the air and they're like embracing, and he thinks they're about to kiss, and then she just passes him right by, and he lands like face first on like a shipping container. Yeah.
He never, and it's like there's no payoff to it, you know.
No, but that's what's like, great about it, though.
Exactly.
She's just like, yeah, I know I'm sexy, and that's fantastic that you think that, but I don't care.
Nah, you ain't it.
Yeah.
In any case, all right, let's move on. Let's move on to this game's music. And me and Shane have a little bit of a differing opinion on this. So Shane, how about you go first, since I just closed out the previous topic?
Sure. So, I mean, overall, I actually really dug what they were doing with the soundtrack. I think it fits the game perfectly. I think the sort of like kind of strange mashup of like Lounge Lizard style music with like dance remix is exactly the kind of thing that this style of game really needs. Specifically, I mean, the tone gets set very well for a number of reasons, but here we're talking about the music in particular. In the first cutscene with that really great dance remix of Fly Me to the Moon. I just thought that was perfect. And honestly, I have no issues with any of, whether it's the soundtrack or the sound design or anything. I thought it was all done incredibly well. I think it fits whatever happens to be going on at the screen at that particular time. I think the sound prompts are well timed and perfectly executed. I think the sound design itself is punchy in all the ways that it needs to be. So no, I really don't have a lot of negative things to say about it.
I would 100% agree with you, except when it comes to the soundtrack. I know that I'm going to catch probably a lot of heat for this. Now, are there some songs that I really love, like the dance mix of Fly Me to the Moon in the first battle that you get? Yes, I absolutely love that. I already said I love the Space Harrier theme being there. I love the Afterburner theme being in there. Mm-hmm. Just in general, though, the rest of the music, when it gets really loungy, yes, it fits the game. I know why it's there. I wouldn't change it. I'm just saying, not my bag. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's fair.
Not my preference. I'm not going to go out of my way to get the Bayonetta soundtrack, is what I'm saying. However, if you really like this music, I got it. It's one of those things where I appreciate the fact of why it's there to fit the overall tone and theme of the game. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I could play this game with any other soundtrack. I will say that. But if I'm going to listen to this, I cannot listen to this soundtrack outside of the game itself, with few exceptions. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where I'm going down on the soundtrack line. Now, in terms of overall sound direction, I love the voice acting. I think we've already gone into, we showered it with enough praise. We've said enough about it.
Yeah.
All the voice actors do their good part. It's B voice acting, but like very good B voice acting. Like it's almost intentional, going back to the House of the Dead comparison. Also, the angels having their own language. I'm a big fan when games put in the effort to create their own language within a game, and having it here, at least I think it's its own language. I hope it's not like Aramaic or some shit. It might be. Who knows? But the fact that it's there,
I'd be more impressed if that was the case.
The fact that it's there, I genuinely appreciate. I like it when they do it in Panzer Dragoon. I like it when they do it here. So I love that. And that too, and all the sound effects in general, everything that you do in terms of action. Action games need to have sounds that when you're attacking enemies, you feel the impact. And this is something you get a lot from beat 'em ups and hack and slashes. If the sound of when your weapon hits the enemy or your fist hits the enemy is dull or muted, it actually takes me away from the experience I'm having and makes it feel like I'm not doing a lot of damage, or the impact isn't as solid as I'd like to be. And Bayonetta does that in spades. It does a very, very good job. So overall, yes, sound direction, big thumbs up. I really do like it. Wouldn't listen to the soundtrack outside of the game, but I get it.
Yeah, I mean, for the record, I probably wouldn't listen to the soundtrack outside of playing the game either, but I think for its intended purpose, I think it does what it needs to do very well.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we are on the same page. Hooray!
Yeah, there you go.
The same opinion, everybody. You get to hear it twice.
Yay.
Hooray!
So any sort of miscellaneous items you wanted to cover about this before we start to wrap things up?
Just very briefly, if you look at Bayonetta's beehive haircut, you're probably wondering why it's like that. It's supposed to represent a pointy hat, like a witch's hat or a black mage's hat. That's why that's there. I thought that was interesting. The other thing is that while the development team really did love Bayonetta's design, and they actually had to fight really hard to keep her glasses, because Sega wanted to take her glasses off, but Hideki Kamiya said, no, you're keeping it on her. And but by the end of development, they actually preferred Jean, or is it Jean or Jean? I can't remember.
I think it's Jean, but I could be wrong about that.
I'm gonna sound like an idiot. So the development team liked Jean more than they liked Bayonetta at the end of development, which I don't know, if I haven't done any research on Bayonetta 2, but that could have led to the character design change in Bayonetta 2, where she had shorter hair, much like Jean does. Who knows? But the thing I really want to touch on with the miscellanea is the amount of Easter eggs that are in this game is just absolutely absurd. Every single time you turn around, there's something that's referencing something else. Like Team Little Angels is a play on Team Little Devils from Devil May Cry. That's the most obvious one. As we said, the halos represent sonic rings. They're almost the exact same thing. Outrun, the song is playing, I think it's Magical Sound Shower, that plays right after you leave the cemetery in the opening sequence. I already talked about Afterburner and Space Harrier right there. There's also nods to a lot of the Clover Studio games that they made before Bayonetta. There's the like Okami. I think one time like Bayonetta paints Luca's face to look like Amaterasu. I think that's how you say it. God, Amaterasu.
I don't know, man. You're the weeb. I got nothing.
Yeah. And she paints his face like that. I think she even makes a passing mention to Okami and just various other Clover Studio games. And I also think there might be a reference to Devil May Cry in there as well. If you realize Jean just looked like Dante, I don't think that's a coincidence.
That is true.
So just pay attention if you're big into the games that Clover Studio made, or just a fan of Sega in general, you're going to be finding Easter eggs left and right. So yeah, if you're there, you're here, you're a retro gamer, you go play this game, you love Sega, you're just going to be like, oh my God, that's in there? Yes, it is. That's not an accident. That is completely intentional, and it is awesome.
And, just real quick, I find it interesting, kind of on retrospective, of just how, like, almost oddly important the inclusion of the glasses in the character design actually is.
Oh, yes.
Which is weird to say, right? Because it feels like such a minor thing. But if you try to imagine Bayonetta without those glasses, it's like almost a completely different character. And it's so strange to think that something that minor is such a big deal. But I am glad that, they fought hard enough to keep that in, because I think it is, again, like I said, oddly enough, I think it is a very like essential piece to her overall design.
Yeah, it adds to her mystique and sexiness. And I couldn't imagine what she would be like if she didn't have those glasses. Okay, so I think this brings us to the end. I think this is going to be a pretty easy, cut and dry part of the show where we're going to talk about whether or not this game holds up today. So Shane, what do you think?
Yes. I mean, 100%. So I think no matter how you play this game, you're going to get a really great experience, with the exception of the weirdly and disappointingly shoddy port to the PS3. Please don't buy that one. But whether you stick with the OG 360 or you get it on Switch or Wii U, or even if you go, full balls deep into the 4K version for PC, no matter what, I think you're going to have a great time with it. I think, and I haven't done a full comparison between all the versions, so maybe Chris can keep me honest on this, but I think the Switch/Wii U version might be the one with the most like cool extra goodies and stuff that you might want to get. So maybe that would be the definitive version if you were going to recommend one. But yeah, man, I mean, hell, like I said, the game starts with you fighting on a fucking rock flying through space with angels and shit. Like, you can't really go wrong with this. Like, if you have even a passing appreciation for like really good B-movie quality stuff and also incredibly tight, action combat, I mean, and also, sexy ladies, then you can't really go wrong here. So yeah, for sure. 100%.
I would just be repeating everything Shane just said. So yeah, great game. It's difficult, so if you like a challenge, this is definitely a game for you as well. Lots of collectibles,
a shitload
that are there, and we forgot to mention, like, a way you collect your weapons is to pick up golden records, amongst other things. There's so many things you can pick up. A lot of collectibles that enhance your experience. Very challenging game. As he said, if you're going to play a version, go for the Switch or Wii U versions of this game. Probably the Switch is your best bet because you probably don't own a Wii U like everybody else except me. And and the reason you want to do that is you can put Bayonetta in various outfits. You can dress her up as Princess Peach, Daisy, or I think it's Samus. So and they all have their strengths and weaknesses to them. And it's really fucking cool.
Also Link.
So go ahead.
She gets a Link outfit too.
That's right. She does get a Link outfit. They're all cool. And yeah, if there's a version you're going to play, go with that one. They also came out with a version that comes with Vanquish. It was like the 10th anniversary edition. that came out for the PS4. I'm not sure if it came out for the Xbox One. I'm not sure. Probably did. But that's, if you don't own a Switch or a Wii U, that's your best way to go. Of course, the 360, you can't go wrong with that, and PC should be fine as well. But yeah, 100% holds up. Go for it. Enjoy it. Appreciate it. And enjoy sexy images of witches pounding you with their hair.
All right. And on that note, I think that kind of brings our discussion of Bayonetta to a close. So, as we are wont to do, we'll do a quick couple of plugs of where you can find us. Of course, if you're listening to the show, you've already found it. So, hi, welcome. And if you're a return listener, then we doubly appreciate that. But if you'd like to engage with us more, there's a couple of ways you can do that. Our Discord is public, so you can head over to bit.ly/RHP chat. That'll give you an invite into our arcade floor general chat channel. You can say hello, share some memes, talk about games with us and the little community we've got going on there, which we're very happy with. And if you would like to perhaps support the show in a more sort of monetary fashion, you can certainly do that. And we have a new fun and exciting way to do that thanks to our ridiculous patrons that we do have in our Discord. So we have a new URL. So you can go to www.gorpfans.com. That's GORPFANS.com, and that will bring you to our Patreon page, where you can choose a donation tier of your choice and get some really cool extra bonus features. Any tier of patron will receive our RH Gaiden sort of bonus episodes that we do. And
we're about to record a lot of them.
Yeah. And as Chris was mentioning at the beginning of the episode, he is going to be busy doing the editing for those.
Oh my God.
So definitely check that out. So for as little as $1 a month, you can get some really great bonus content. And if you step up a little bit higher into the tiers, you can get things like our rapid fire reviews, the outtakes from our recording sessions, all that great stuff. So a lot of great stuff there, as well as swag. Like we actually just got our exclusive patron shirt design done the week of this recording. And so that is going to be going out to our fantastic patron Lyle very shortly. He'll be the first one to have the hyper exclusive shirt, which I know he's excited about. So check that out. And speaking of shirts, we also do have a merch store. So if you want to check that out, they've got a lot of cool stuff over there, like mugs and stickers and hats. You can go to bit.ly/RHP merch and kind of look through that stuff there. And Chris, why don't you tell the fine people about our Twitch stream shenanigans?
Absolutely. You can find us on Twitch every Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern time-ish, because we don't always start on time, because, we're like that.
Yeah.
But you could go find us there. It's twitch.tv/retrohangover, and we'd love to have you there. Again, we're getting more and more people there every week. Some of our good Twitch followers that show up, like Lyle, of course, and Randall shows up, and Riku and Mass Llama. Thank you so much for showing up to the Twitch streams. We really do appreciate it, but come on by and keep the chat going. These are a lot more fun when we have a good discussion going on. Also, I would like to plug my own Instagram account, which is @Zodiac, XODYAK, where I post pictures of my collection, and I like to put a lot of those over on the Retro Hangover account page as well. So go ahead and follow me and follow the Retro Hangover account page. I would really appreciate it. And just a few shout outs to a couple of our podcast friends that I didn't call out at the beginning of the show, which is the Grand Rapidians Play Video Games podcast. Thanks, guys. Also, Bonsai Chat, because, Nerd Trainer's there, and he's also one of our patrons, and he has his own podcast you should go check out. And, of course, You Random, which you should check out, because that is our patron St. Lyle's podcast that he does.
That's
so
right.
Go ahead, if you have some extra time, just go ahead and check out those podcasts if you are so inclined.
Fantastic. All right. Well, with all of that being said, until next time,
play with your wicked weaved joystick.
Shane here with a quick message. The one rule Chris and I have always gone by regarding advertisements is this: it has to be something we use and can personally vouch for. If you know me, you know I love coffee. And Bones Coffee Company has been my go-to for home brewing for quite some time now. Their small batch beans come in an impressive variety of flavors like Mint Invaders from Chocolate Space, or Electric Unicorn, which I swear tastes exactly like Fruity Pebbles. And the best part? No added sugar or calories involved, just natural flavors infused right into the beans themselves. Build your own sample pack of 5 4-ounce bags to find out which flavors speak to you, or jump in headfirst with full 12-ounce bags. They've even got K-Cups. Step up your homebrew game with Bones Coffee by visiting bit.ly/RHPBones. That's bit.ly/RHPBONES.